Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, we have our usual roundup of the big stories around the world relevant to the Sikh community. And today we point our focus on the deteriorating law and order situation, particularly in Canada, where the explosion of organised crime from India is reaching new and unprecedented levels, and much of it deliberately blamed on Khalistanis by the Indian media. And finally, we'll take a look at the latest annual report released by the Sikh Federation International. We'll take a look at the key issues it highlights and the organisation's progress towards making Khalistan a reality. All this and more on today's show, but joining me as always is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our amazing viewers out there. Thanks for tuning in yet once again. Don't forget to stick around at the end of the show to see if your comments made it to the big screen. Tomorrow night, we're going to take a look at a very interesting story about the UN and the current status with Russia trying to push for India to get a permanent seat and what that's going to mean. But until then, we are looking tonight at the Bishnoi gang and all of that violence in Canada. So we've got a big show for you tonight, a big show for you tomorrow night, and I hope that you make sure that you share, like, and subscribe. Make sure that you invite your friends and family to take part in the conversations that we have, because pretty soon we'll be going live and you'll be able to phone in and have your say as well. Back to you, Angus.
Indeed, and James and I together today will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And as usual, we will take a look at loads of great comments at the end of the show, so do stay tuned for those. Right, James, as you say, lots to get through. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
It appears that the local community here in Surrey, BC is under siege, and it's really instilling fear and resilience in the face of the extortion attempts. In the last 72 hours, and particularly the last 24, the city of Surrey has been under siege, not by an invading army, but by a persistent and terrifying echo of more gunfire. 4 separate shootings in a single day marked a violent escalation in a crisis that's been simmering for months. And we're going to take a look at those stories in just a moment. Now, the targets were varied, but the message was singular and chilling. A home with a family inside, a local restaurant, and a move of shocking audacity, a community police station itself were caught in the crossfire. This is not random violence, folks. This is the public face of a shadow war being waged against our community here in Surrey, British Columbia. We will forego the international stories as we're going to focus on what's going on here locally in Surrey with the diaspora and the community as a whole. Now, it is a war of extortion, intimidation, and fear, organized, of course, with deep roots that stretch from our local businesses here in Surrey all the way back to the organized crime syndicates in India. Now, the decision to attack a police station represents a profound and deliberate strategic shift by these criminal elements. Firing upon a home or a business is an act of intimidation designed to terrorize a civilian target into compliance. Firing upon a symbol of state authority, or in our case, provincial authority and local authority, however, is a declaration. It's an act of defiance intended to project an image of power that challenges the law enforcement agencies itself. It sends a terrifying message to the community. If even the police can be targeted, then who is safe? Now, let's take a look at what these incidents have involved and what's going on. Now, with this image on the screen that you're seeing now, this is in Whalley, a north part of Surrey, British Columbia, where we don't know exactly whether or not this targeting the police station is just out of frame here. But we don't know for sure if this had anything to do with the ongoing extortion attempts or the gang activity. The individual actually started shooting at a local SkyTrain, or that is like our above ground ALRT system, and above ground subway for those that don't know what that is. So yeah, that gives you an idea of our transit system, and one of the main stations was targeted by this individual. Now, it's not known if he was shooting back at the police or at other random individuals or vehicles, but it ended right in front of the police station where some shots were fired at the station itself. So we don't know if that was actually an intended target or just a byproduct of him trying to escape from the earlier attack at the Gateway SkyTrain station. Now, The individual had fled from the SkyTrain station, as I said, and then with the Surrey Police Services District 1 community police offices, he did fire additional shots there. The police did take one individual into custody. The emergency response team was on site, and they are the ones that took him into custody. Now, they also state that he was taken into custody without injury. However, in a contradiction to that, they said that he was also wheeled away on a stretcher receiving medical attention from the BC Emergency Health Services. And that could be that a result of maybe a medical or mental health distress concern that they had. So again, we don't know exactly what the situation is there, but we will definitely be keeping tabs on that to see if it actually is part and parcel of the bigger problem of violence, and that definitely is a concern in our community. Now, it should also be noted that a big case that was going through the courts in Victoria, British Columbia, ended with a sentencing of 7 years for an individual who was accused of being involved in the AP Dillon shooting last year, where they shot up his home and set fire to a vehicle in the driveway. That individual has been sentenced to 7 years in the federal prison system here in Canada. And the second individual that they are still searching for is believed to be over in India. Now, as we continue on, we're going to take a look at another shooting here that actually mirrors almost another shooting over the weekend. Now, this particular one was at a restaurant here in Surrey. Once again, not far from that, not too far from the police station as that goes. Now, they believe that this one definitely was in connection to extortion attempts. And the Ustad G76 Indian restaurant was the target at 2100 block of King George, and actually not too far from my residence either. Now, the significant part of this is that this is part of a chain of restaurants. The other one in Maple Ridge, British Columbia, which is just north of Surrey across the Fraser River. And that other location was the target of shooting that took place over the weekend here in the last 72 hours. So definitely looking at that as it continues. Now, here in South Surrey, we are seeing an increase as well. Generally, over the historical context, South Surrey is more of an affluent neighborhood and a lot higher property values, where we used to see a lot of the violence segregated to the lower income area. And it's not because of people being lower income, it was because they also had a drug and gang problem in certain neighborhoods. And so again, not to, paint anybody with the same brush as the gangs and the addicts and all of that. I'm just saying that it was fairly isolated, not to mention that we're more rural here in this area with a lot of farms and such. But it seems to be spreading to this neighborhood as well. And that is a big concern, that the city of Surrey is a part of the provincial and federal task force that has been brought forward to battle this extortion problem. Now, as I said, the individual that was actually convicted in the Victoria courts and faces 7 years in prison has been linked and confirmed by the judge to be linked to the Bishnoi gang out of India, which of course we know that there's a lot of other linkage going on with the Bishnoi gang and a lot of this violence and extortion activity that's going on. Now, as we look at this, we can scoot over to another incident where, not far again from the actual police station that was shot up today, home was actually attacked, and they shot up again overnight. Now, these cowards are taking shots at these businesses and homes overnight because obviously they don't want to be identified. They think that they can sneak around and just basically intimidate people as opposed to targeting individuals. However, with that said, we have seen daylight shootings, including the one at the police station today, where it seems to be that some of them really don't care if they get caught or if they are caught in cross or return gunfire from the police or others. So again, there's the segment that is using it as intimidation and fear, while there also is another step where they're actually taking action and really don't care about the safety of those buildings or people they're targeting, and innocent bystanders or others in the community. And that is, of course, a big concern. Here is a statement from today, or sorry, yesterday at this point, from the Surrey Police Service.
And 2:30 a.m. If you witnessed anyone or any suspicious vehicles, to please contact police.
The restaurant chain was targeted less than 2 weeks ago with a separate shooting at a Maple Ridge location.
So again, my apologies. It was within the last few weeks, not the last 72 hours for the incident in Maple Ridge. Now, as we jump across, we can see that this is continuing throughout Western Canada. It's not just in Surrey. Project Gaslight, which we focused on earlier this year, we were talking about it during the summertime, and that was a big police activity and task force that was made up of officers from the Edmonton Police Service, the Calgary Police Service, the RCMP, and others. Now, they have announced that one of the individuals we spoke of this past summer that had escaped and was escaped, not physically escaped, but he fled the jurisdiction. And they believe that both he and the other individual had left for India. Now, this Arjun Sanan had actually returned to Canada the other day, and police were waiting for him at the airport. Again, they are looking at potential ties to the Bishnoi gang, and the Edmonton Police Services said that they don't have definitive confirmation at this time, but they are looking at it. Now, this person was arrested and charged with disarming a firearm recklessly, times 2 counts, plus possession of a prohibited firearm and ammunition, times 3 counts. And this was in relation to a shooting that took place in late 2023 in Edmonton, as well as Winnipeg and Sherwood Park. Did you say something, Angus?
Sorry, no, I was clearing my throat.
Okay, no worries. I just thought maybe you were jumping in there. No worries. Now, immediately after the shooting, as I said, they believe that he fled to India. The other individual that they have linked to this case has actually been located, and he's in Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates, somewhere over in that region. But in any event, we do not have an extradition treaty with that nation, and therefore they are currently working to bring that individual back. But again, it takes a bit of time because of the fact that there is no set extradition hearing or extradition process. Now, these individuals were involved in 3 separate shootings throughout the Edmonton area, as well as Winnipeg, and I believe Regina was the third one. So all within the Winnipeg-Edmonton corridor, and that's across the Prairie provinces here in Canada, so kind of central Canada. With that said, it should also be noted that although nobody was injured in one of the shootings, well, actually in any of them, but one shooting in particular was definitely more concerning than the others when a bullet traveled through the home and actually was lodged into a children's toy box. So it shows how close and how different the outcome could have been in that case, that a child just innocently playing could have been hit as the bullets hit the toy box in their bedroom. Just a horrific situation going on here, Angus, and it's getting worse instead of better. Although the task force is making great inroads, it's going to take some time for them to get to 100% in terms of their operational processes. It should also be noted that the Edmonton Police Service has launched a follow-up task force to Operation Gaslight. They are taking this very seriously and the influx of more violence yet once again across Canada. So they are communicating with the Surrey Police Service and the RCMP and the task forces that are being engaged to deal with this problem. So again, bringing more resources together throughout Western Canada to go after these animals who seem to think that the streets of our communities are their playgrounds. And the message has to be clear that they are not. Now, it should also be noted that both the Edmonton Police Service as well as the Surrey Police Service are urging individuals, if you are being targeted by these extortion groups, to reach out and let them know. The number here in Surrey alone has gone up to 56 cases this year. And that is a big jump, as just a few weeks ago we were reporting about 48 cases. So again, it shows how prevalent this is and how much it's growing. And a part of it could also be the heightened awareness campaign that the police in Surrey and the city of Surrey have gone to really raise the awareness, get out in the media. They have publications that they are distributing that are in multilingual. So they are in Punjabi, in Hindu, in English, in Chinese. So different diasporas in different parts of the community, although this particular task force is looking at the South Asian community as the major targets of this extortion ring by the Bishnoi gang and others. In closing, so again, if you have been or are the subject of any extortion attempts, please reach out to them. You can contact your local police service, or you can contact them instead of calling them, you can go online. But if you are concerned about your safety and such and don't want to actually reach out to them directly, you can also reach out through the designated Crime Stoppers offices, both in Edmonton, in Surrey, and across the country. As we know, there is an issue in Brampton, Ontario, Mississauga, Toronto, and elsewhere. So again, it is a nationwide issue that is definitely looking that it's getting worse before it gets better, Angus.
This is it's very worrying to see this, really, because I mean, for example, here in the UK, we're lucky to some degree, if that's the right word to use, that we have very few guns in our society. There was a terrible incident when I was a bit younger in the 1990s, particularly. It was a guy ran rampant in Scotland, and he killed it must have been nearly 20 school children amongst many other adults.
I remember
with an automatic or semi-automatic weapon. And as a result of that, we really clamped down on guns. It's now extremely difficult to get hold of guns. In fact, the only people who have guns now are criminals, actually, as it happens. But even it's made it extremely difficult for criminals to get hold of guns. So as a result, our gun crime, touch wood, relatively speaking, is quite low. It is creeping up again, but it's not as bad as it used to be. But when I see North America, particularly obviously the US is well known, but even Canada, I'm almost quite astonished to see gun crime happening in Canada. You know, this sort of relatively peaceful, civilized society of Canada. It's quite shocking. And of course, it's the criminals, once again, who are ruining it for everybody. And once the criminals get easy access to guns, then of course, I mean, by definition, criminals are not intelligent. I mean, they become criminals because they can't make it in normal society. That is why they're pushed into criminality. And then when you see them, traditionally they target the vulnerable of our society. These extortion rackets, again, tend to target the vulnerable, those people who will probably give in easily. But to take it up to another level, and this is where it starts getting worrying, is when they start attacking the police. They are starting to attack the state infrastructure. That is a different game that we're playing now. This is very different. Now, again, it highlights the lack of intelligence, because you can't win. You cannot beat the Canadian state unless you have an army of several 100,000 people behind you. You are not going to win that battle. So to turn your guns on the police, the RCMP or whatever, you're going to lose that one. You know, it's stupidity, but it does highlight what we're up against here. And it's very concerning because, it does imply a breakdown of law and order. It implies that these people are just not afraid of anything. And that's the fear, because now it starts to put the fear into normal society. Now, no doubt the Canadian state is going to mobilise a proportionate response in this, and they will clamp down there. And they will, again, as I say, they will win this battle. There's no question. But it's the collateral damage in the meantime. And that's the fear. Now, the collateral damage of this is huge, because as I'm going to talk about in one of my stories, this export of Indian organised crime is terrible. It's really damaging Western society, in particular, as we see in Canada. It's a terrible thing to happen in a very civilised country that is Canada. And yet India is almost proud of its export. You just need to go across social media to get a flavour of the Hindutva feeling of this. They're delighted about this spread of organised crime, of their criminals, their third world criminals into first world Canada. And it's nothing to be proud of. And of course, that's one thing. But the other impact is it ruins life for everybody else, not just for society as a general. It's the impact, of course, on the immigrants, on the immigrant population, the legal immigrants who are living peaceful, decent lives, and of course the Sikh population, and even, of course, the general Hindu population. I mean, we don't even need to be specific about the Sikh population here, but certainly it's the Sikh population that definitely are suffering because, of course, the Indian media are now obviously seeing these stories, probably slightly a bit embarrassed about it because it's tarnishing India's reputation on the global stage. So what are they doing? They're spinning this story, and I'll show you, I'll provide proof of this in a moment. They're spinning this story to blame, it's those Sikhs. It's those Sikhs are running out of control. It's all Sikh crime. It's these wretched Khalistanis. We told you they were terrorists. Now look at them. They're shooting up Canada. Of course, it's rubbish, but this is what they're doing. So, of course, it is the local population that is suffering, the local Sikh population. And in turn, and again, this brings it full circle back to this argument we talked about regularly now, is that, of course, the rise of the right wing extremists are using this as this is fodder. This is ammunition to the right wing to turn on our resident populations, our perfectly law-abiding, decent, contributing populations of Sikhs and, of course, other minorities, and saying, "Oh, look, you're all a bunch of criminals." Well, no, they're not. But this is what the Govt media are helping perpetuate, saying, "Oh, it's the likes of the Khalistanis, it's the Sikhs, etc." But also, as I say, it's the other minorities as well that indirectly suffer because the right wing see this. And again, talking about social media, you go on social media, I'm horrified actually when I see even actually relatively normal, decent people are now starting to share these right wing memes, these extremist memes. So again, the people in the middle, the normal people, are now being sucked, as we talked about in the past, into these extremes, particularly the right wing extreme. They're turning against immigrants, people who actually they've rubbed shoulders with perfectly happily and amicably for years, decades even, and suddenly they're now saying, "Oh, well, look, you see, but you're all a bunch of criminals. Do we really want you in our society?" And that's the ridiculous impact, this indirect impact that crimes like this are having. It is, again, polarizing our society, and it comes back to the same theme we talked about over and over again. Our society is becoming divided. These tactics, and again, once again, it's coming from India. India is driving its divisive tactics, not just domestically in India, but now across the diaspora, and it's now affecting our societies here in the West, James.
Absolutely, Angus. And for our viewers and for those following us on Substack, on Saturday evening at 8 p.m., we're going to actually do a live feed on our Substack channel for people to talk about, call in and talk about this issue of the crime here in Surrey and across Canada. And you are welcome to call in during that time and be a part of the conversation on the Savage TV Substack. And with that said, of course, we will not require you to state your name on the air. We don't want to put anybody at risk, so you can remain anonymous in terms of your call if you want to call in and talk about it. But we will have a lot more information about what's being done by the cities, by the police, and of course by the community. So join us on our Substack Live on Saturday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Angus.
Look forward to that, James. And let's continue the story then, because I'm going to show you. This is a video. Actually, again, this is in Ontario, in Canada. This is one of the attacks as part of this sort of spreading of crime. Just watch this. This is an attack on a cinema. Now, there we go. That's one of many criminal incidents that have occurred in Canada, perpetuated by the Indian diaspora. Now, this is how it was reported back in India. And this, again, when we talk about evidence and finding the truth of these things, this was reported, the Times of India, which of course is one of the more better respected news outlets in India. But of course, as always, like all the news outlets in India, it is part of this Govt media, this controlled narrative media on behalf of the BJP. And they say they blamed it on Khalistani radicals. They say they tried to set fire to this Ontario cinema. And the article, and again, this is a good example of how they frame these stories to blame the Sikh diaspora, but particularly to blame the Khalistani, the Khalistani community. They say, while Canadian police focus on tackling the Bishnoi syndicate, pro-Khalistani elements attempted arson at a cinema. So again, first of all, we say, right, okay, the Canadian police are focusing on the Bishnoi gang. Yeah, obviously they acknowledge the existence of the Bishnoi gang. But they're saying, actually, the Khalistani campaigners, the Khalistani diaspora are now actually taking advantage of this situation. Whilst the police are distracted, they're going about their criminal activities. So they're saying they've attacked this Ontario cinema twice within a week. And as a result, the theatre stopped screening Hindi movies since. The attacks were carried out on the 2nd of October, 25th of September. And then guns were used in the second incident. Now, first of all, you see the framing of this as saying this cinema was a Hindi cinema. It was showing Hindi films. As a result, the cinema has been forced to stop showing Hindi films. Now, again, you see the victim framing. So it's the Hindus are the victims here, victims of these wretched Khalistani terrorists. So again, they've set the platform. Now they start talking about Sikhs for Justice. Designated terror group, Sikhs for Justice. Well, again, this word terror, SFJ. Well, as we always say, Sikhs for Justice is not a terrorist outfit. If they were, they wouldn't be allowed to exist in the United States. But again, Govt media framing the narrative, instilling into the reader this subliminal message, terrorist. This word terrorist is always used. They keep using it. So the readers naturally, subliminally, then start assuming, oh, these Khalistanis are all terrorists. Designated terror group Sikhs for Justice released a statement on Friday calling on the Carney government to ban all made in India films. Now, this is where, again, clever manipulation. Because, yes, this is right. Sikhs for Justice did release a statement saying we need to ban all made in India films because they see it as pro-Hindutva propaganda. Now, yes, that as a standalone story, that's a fact. It's not denied. And absolutely, Sikhs for Justice, Gurpatan Singh Pinin, I'm sure have no doubt will stand by this. We don't want Hindutva propaganda films being shown in the West, and we will try and boycott them. That is their democratic right. There's nothing wrong with that. But look how it's been, the word juxtaposed. It's been put inside this story to imply, remember in that first paragraph, it says a Hindu cinema has been forced to stop showing Hindi films. Put that next to Sikhs for Justice, say we need to ban all these films. So again, you can start to see how again they've cherry-picked facts to create this narrative that clearly it was Khalistani activists, it was Khalistani terrorists who are now victimizing Hindus. And so innocent Hindus can't even see films in their own language. Total nonsense. This is absolute nonsense. Anyway, so the story goes on and it follows that same theme. And it even quotes Sikhs for Justice Chief Panoon, claiming that Made in India films was no longer a cultural label but had become a political weapon for Modi's regime. Every screening and every product stamped Made in India carries the imprint of a violent ideology that is driving India towards a Hindutva totalitarian state. So it seems a very balanced article. So they're quoting Panoon saying these Make in India phrases using, saying we need to ban these films. But again, as I said, they've now cherry-picked that whole story, put it into this story, implying, it's not true, but implying clearly it was Khalistanis and SFJ supporters who attacked the cinema. Now, the truth, as was released on, again, news outlets have actually, or independent news outlets have actually investigated this story. Investigations are ongoing. These attacks stem from years-long turf wars among South Indian distributors, which have seen rival cinemas targeted. One of the CEOs of the theatres attacked said, I get the clear sense this is a mob-style situation where there are jealousies and anxiety because one theatre is getting a film, another theatre is not getting the film, and one distributor is getting rights to a film and another one is not. So the truth is, this is a turf war between cinemas showing different films. It's nothing to do with Hindus, it's nothing to do with Khalistanis. It's literally just a commercial turf war between theatres. It's their own individual arguments about who can show which films, whatever. It's nothing to do with Khalistan. So again, James, you can see this is prime Govt media at its absolute worst. This is, as I say, this story It perfectly exemplifies and shows as an example how the Govt media cherry picks facts, known facts that we can't dispute, but puts them and spins them in a certain order, puts them together to imply something completely different. Here we go, prime story, it's these Khalistani terrorists attacking these Hindi cinemas. The Hindus once again are the victims, and again this follows the same narrative we see right across North America, particularly with organisations like Hindu American Foundation, who are spinning this narrative in the public domain and across the news outlets where they can, that Hindus are being victimised. Hindus are the targets of Khalistani terrorists. Hindus are the victims in all this. Complete nonsense, completely untrue. But that, once again, is the narrative, and this feeds into that narrative, Jones.
Absolutely, Angus. And let's not forget that earlier this year we were reporting on the tow truck wars, as they were called, in Toronto and the Metro Toronto region. And again, we were seeing arsons as one of the tools that these competing tow truck companies were using against each other. And again, it is about the battle for the business, battle for the dollar, and it had absolutely nothing to do in that case either of a war against the Hindus or the Sikhs or the Khalistanis. Nothing to do with that. But of course, at that time, the Times of India and other Govt media were actually trying to frame it as a Khalistan issue when it had absolutely no bearing on it whatsoever.
So again, a classic case of media manipulation, and we just can't stress enough. I mean, I think we're preaching to the converted in our own audience, but it's to try and get to ordinary Indians, just to make them realise just how easily they are being manipulated. And a story like this is just such an easy, simple example to demonstrate and prove how people are being manipulated against the enemies of the BJP, against the enemies of Hindutva. When, again, ordinary Hindus, if they actually knew the truth, they would realise just how they are being totally hoodwinked. They are being completely manipulated in these things. It's terrible. Anyway, let's move on to my second story. And I think yesterday it was, the Sikh Federation has released its annual report. Every year it produces a report. It gives an update of the state of affairs of the Sikh community, particularly here in the UK. But of course it now is starting to branch out internationally. Now the Sikh Federation UK last year and into this year have now extended their reach. They've actually sort of grown and coordinated with their overseas compatriots. That's the wrong word. Their overseas compadres, perhaps a better word. Whereas we've talked a lot about unifying the Sikh voice. And the Sikh Federation UK has then established itself overseas, and particularly in Canada. We now have the Sikh Federation Canada. And of course, in three other nations, over time, they'll be building up this Sikh Federation International, again, which is designed to create this global Sikh voice that will in turn then be able to have that legal recognition that can then go have these conversations with the United Nations and other international leaders as one voice for the establishment of Khalistan. So that is the sort of the background context. But the Sikh Federation itself, it's been doing sterling advocacy work here in the UK. It's very much like the Sikh Coalition in the United States, as an example, just to give a sort of comparison. And so they've been doing an awful lot of work, an awful lot of campaigning, lobbying work, behind the scenes work. They do a huge amount behind the scenes. And of course, they're very well connected. And of course, many of the key senior members of the Sikh Federation are again, very well connected with the British government and with our own MPs, etc., and with the civil service. So they do actually have a lot of reach, they have a lot of power, and of course a lot of impact. So their annual report is always worth a read, and it really does give a very genuine, very truthful state of affairs. So I'm just going to quickly just run through. The report's huge; it's 64 pages long, so I'm not going to inflict 64 pages on everybody. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to cherry pick the sort of the highlights, which are sort of summarised in the introduction. I'm just going to cherry pick a few sort of bits and pieces, which gives you sort of an overview, let's say, of what it's about. Now, of course, with our new government here in the UK, it was actually a time of great opportunity for the Sikh community to sort of get on board with this new government. So, look, welcome to number 10 Downing Street. Now, here are the issues that we would like you to deal with. And, of course, amongst many issues, Starmer's government have been lobbied very strongly, very powerful by the Sikh community. And, of course, one of those key issues which has been raised with them is this issue of transnational oppression by particularly the Indian government. So, of course, and it was the 40th anniversary of the Sikh Federation last year, and this, again, coincided with the new government. So, again, it was this great sort of nexus point to then start lobbying the government. So, they as part of the report, and they go into great detail about this, but they talk about how they have lobbied the government about transnational oppression, but particularly organising at an international level, focusing on re-establishing a Sikh homeland within this context with an ever-changing geopolitical landscape. Now,
Right.
again, they talk about that a year ago at their last convention, we called out India as a rogue state. And there's quite powerful words, quite emotive language they're using here. The further revelations in the last 12 months around transnational repression and political interference by the Indian government, as well as the geopolitical changes that we are all witnessing since Trump came to power, have totally exposed Indian politicians. So again, this isn't just here in the UK, it goes right across the whole diaspora, is that more and more governments are now waking up to this fact. So again, the highlight of the fact that you can't deny this, Mr. Starmer, it's going on because it's been recognised right across the diaspora. India's decision to openly align with Russia and China, who will always be a foe, highlights India's fragility and duplicity. It's also opened the eyes of Western nations, led by the US, on the tightrope India walks with respect to neutrality around major conflicts, such as in Ukraine. We're already seeing and expect the demand for Sikh independence to get a major boost in the West and elsewhere. So this is an important paragraph. It's really highlighting the fact that the West is waking up to what India is about. India is clearly aligning with Russia, as it has been for decades, since 1947, as we've talked about, but certainly it seems bizarrely to be increasingly aligning with China, one of its, what we thought was going to be one of its potential foes. Instead, we're seeing Modi moving closer and closer into bed with Xi Jinping. Now, of course, the impact then on the West is very significant. India is becoming less and less of a reliable ally and more of a potential foe. In that context, it's more opportune then to talk about Khalistan. And of course, the Sikh Federation are jumping on this, saying, look, well, there's an answer. And again, just watch on my podcast where I talked about Khalistan and the advantages, what's in it for the West. Well, the Sikh Federation clearly know what's in it for the West. And again, they're highlighting in this situation, this polarising of East versus West, India, not an ally, you need Khalistan. So this is, again, forms a big part of this report. Now, the Sikh Federation International, and again, what I was talking about earlier, this is the Sikh Federation International, was officially launched in the UK just after last year's convention and in 5 regions across the globe. The Federation's activities and contacts at the United Nations and at the European level, in terms of the European Parliament and European Commission, have increased and are developing. So again, behind the scenes, and again, I always talk a lot about, there's an awful lot going on beneath the surface, and the Sikh Federation International has been formed deliberately to push the whole Khalistan agenda forward, to go talk to the key stakeholders, the key decision makers, the key policy makers at the European Union, the United Nations, and these global bodies, which are really, really important. And then, of course, here in the UK, it then looks domestically, Labour, that's our government, and its leadership before coming to power made several specific promises, which it now seems to have reneged upon. Yes, and again, I'm not going to go over old ground. We've talked about this a lot, but basically 3 key areas, demanding this judge-led public inquiry into our involvement here in the UK in the 1984 Operation Blue Star. The release of Jagtar Singh Johal, still outrageously a British citizen held in arbitrary detention in India for nearly 8 years now. British government done absolutely nothing about. And finally, treating anti-Sikh hate on par with anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. Again, this sort of 2-tier sort of justice, again, from the Starmer government. Why is the Sikh community not treated equally as the Jewish community or the Islamic community, particularly when it comes to hate crimes and protection and security, etc.? For some reason, the Sikh community here in the UK is treated as second-class citizens. Why? Good question. Now then, and this comes back to our politics, and I touched on this, was it yesterday or the day before? We talked about our Sikh MPs. We have 11 Sikh MPs. And so it focuses quite a bit on that. It says, although it was great to see the number of Sikh MPs, as we say here in the UK, increase from 2 to 11 in last year's general election, it's fair to conclude only Jas Atwal and Verinder Juice have lived up to expectations and joined Preet Kaur Gill and Tamlinjit Singh Desai to openly take up Sikh issues. Others, the remainers, especially those representing sizable local Sikh communities, have either been silent or uninterested and need to be encouraged to do more. More worryingly, 1 or 2 of them have proved they totally lack Panthic credentials and may be more interested in appeasing the Indian authorities. Unless they change their ways, the latter will be fully exposed and every effort will be made to ensure they are not re-elected. So this is a big warning shot to several of our Sikh MPs who were elected by, of course, their large Sikh communities, their electorate, And all they've done since they're getting into power, once they've joined Parliament, they've done nothing to represent the Sikh community and its key issues that they're supposed to be representing. Now, there's a few exceptions there. Well done to Jess Atwell and Brenda Jis, who have actually been very vocal, and we've talked about them. We've shown them up in Parliament talking, but the rest of them haven't. They've just completely betrayed not just their electorate, but betrayed their own panthic principles, if indeed they have them. And the question here is actually, do they have any panthic credentials? And that's quite a strong accusation. And worse still, they are now being accused of potentially representing India, potentially actually unfolding the Hindutva agenda. Why? They're Sikhs. You know, I mean, again, it's no surprise that the warning shot has been sent. In other words, that this warning is to those particular MPs. If you don't start representing the Panth, if you don't start representing your Sikh electorate and pushing the agenda, these issues that Sikh people elected you upon, you're going to be out at the next election. Absolutely right. So full force to the Sikh community on that one. And then it wraps up by saying Labour are facing an existential crisis, literally, as indeed, strange enough, for the Conservative Party. We talk a lot about our politics here in the UK. Our politics in the UK is going through this seismic, massive change because the two main parties, Labour, Conservative, have just become these globalists, these World Economic Forum proxies. They don't represent the people of this country. They don't represent the working class, the socialists here in the UK on Labour side. They don't represent the traditional right-of-centre Conservatives from the Conservative Party. They've become this homogenised uni-party. The Conservative Labour just basically become one party. You can't put a piece of paper between them in terms of policy. And that policy isn't representing British people, ordinary British people. It's representing some globalist agenda, which nobody voted for. And again, this agenda is seems to be promoting illegal immigration, one of our key issues of the time. Anyway, so back to the report. As a result, of course, the report picks up on this, saying that Labour are facing local elections next year. We have our sort of local little elections for our councillors, our local councillors, in May next year. This is a time when the Labour Party are most likely to get a huge kicking. Keir Starmer is going to be out. I predict this. And in fact, even it says in this report, they expect that Starmer will not be in power by this report next year, as in by the time they release next year's report. Because Starmer, as I said yesterday, is our most unpopular Prime Minister in history. Literally, he has set records in how unpopular our new Prime Minister is. And frankly, it's not surprising because of his activities. So he's likely to be out. And this will happen probably, after our local elections in May next year. So again, and this sets a huge amount of uncertainty for our Sikh community because who's going to replace him? What is going to be the agenda once he's replaced, etc. So again, there is this fear, this insecurity amongst the Sikh community here in the UK. What's coming next? Because Starmer, who we elected, as a generalisation, the Sikh community voted for Labour. They've been betrayed ever since Labour took power. So what comes next, James? We don't know. But again, this does actually reflect a lot of politics globally now, is that I think we're going through a global seismic political shift. There's an awful lot going on, a lot of polarisation, a lot of division being grown, and maybe this is something we'll talk about on another show. But again, we've talked about this division. Division is growing. We are being polarised societies. We are being turned against each other. And this is very symptomatic of that, James.
Absolutely. And what should be really concerning is that the pendulum is swinging so far in the opposite direction now. And of course, we talk about the left and the right, and you mentioned this quite often, Angus, is that the ones that we are hearing and the ones that are having influence are the extreme left and the extreme right. And all of the majority in the center are remaining silent. And, of course, afraid to speak out because they get targeted, whether it's through doxing or just, ignorance and so much more, that people are not speaking out. And that is allowing for the misinformation and the disinformation to continue just permeating through societies, whether that's in the UK, whether it's in Canada, the US, and it's creating such a great polarization and divide. And not only that, but an anger that really shouldn't be there. Instead, it is just fueling the fire. And as you said, I think that it is going to be a major global shift in geopolitics over the next 5 years.
We need to be very careful. I think we, the majority, the 80% or whatever arbitrary number you want to pick, but we, the majority, are normal, decent people. We want to live side by side perfectly happily. But we are deliberately being divided. There is this sort of wall going down that is, we're being pushed to these extremes, extreme left, extreme right, because of these events. And we talk about in Canada, the events, the shootings, etc. Here in the UK, the immigration, and indeed, of course, in the US, is that things like these immigration issues are deliberately, if indeed it is a deliberate agenda, are pushing people to the extremes. Again, extreme left, extreme right. There's almost no middle ground. What we need to do, all of us, and this is really an appeal to our audience once again, is talk to more and more people. We need to bring back the narrative. We need to take back control from these people, from these extremists. And unfortunately, it's our leaders, it's our political leaders that are feeding this as well. They're as guilty as these extremists because they are deliberately feeding this agenda, because clearly they have their own agenda. I mean, again, pick your conspiracy theory of choice. It doesn't matter whether it's a conspiracy theory or not. The results speak for themselves. Our leaders are leading us into this polarization of global society. It's East versus West. It's left versus right. Everybody's being pushed to the extremes. And this, unfortunately, is the context within which, excuse me, I've had to spray a lot of fly spray in here because we've had an explosion of cluster flies, as they called yesterday, overnight when we had a sudden warm spell. If you see me coughing a lot, that's why. So I'm trying to speak in a toxic atmosphere of chemicals, of chemical warfare that's been going on. So apologies for that. But anyway, so back to, but the big concern here, so this is what happened in the 1920s and 30s, is this is what led to the Second World War. Again, it was the polarization of people. People were pushed to extremes by events. Now, maybe arguably it wasn't deliberate in the 20s and 30s, but that was the result of what happens when you get extreme polarization. People pushed to extremes of left and right. And this is what's happening again now. And this is why we, the people, need to take back control. We've got to stop this happening. We've got to unite all our communities. And again, as I see it across social media, how much do I see now? It's terrifying on the left and the right, these memes, these videos spread around, how the anger is rising. Please don't fall for the anger. Please take steps back, look at what's going on and unite. We all need to join hands, metaphorically speaking, across the communities, across the globe, across the world, and prevent these extremists, prevent this agenda from unfolding. People power, as I always say. Anyway, James, talking about people power, I think we need to move on to our comment section. Time is marching on, as it always is. And actually, in fact, very timely. TC, thank you for this comment. This is a perfect segue again into what we've been talking about. TC has a very long but very powerful point, which I totally agree with. We are being played, as indeed are politicians, but as you rightly say, which came first? Is it the chicken or the egg? And we need to listen to the language being spoken. Yeah, exactly what I've been saying. The language that's being used is deliberately provocative. It's emotive. Now, we had this terrible crime a few days ago. A Jewish synagogue was attacked by an Islamic fundamentalist, an extremist. He went in with a knife or a machete and killed somebody or killed several people. And again, it's created anger, and now we've got mobs on the street, angry mobs on the street on both sides. He was pro-Palestinian, so we've now got the pro-Palestinian mobs on the street chanting. These are all, and ironically, many of these are white middle-class people. They have picked up the flag of Palestine. They don't know anything about Palestine. They've never been to Palestine in their lives. But somehow they've been whipped up and manipulated into violently supporting the cause of Palestine. Rightly or wrongly, but it doesn't matter. They are there. They're not Palestinians or even Arabs. They are white middle-class people. And this is the ridiculousness of what's happening. And likewise, on the right, we have now people being pushed into the far right who are going out there angry on the streets. And then we have all these commentators in the middle who are pushing the agenda. And so so TC rightly says that refers to this attack on the synagogue last week. And again, it's talking about this level of hatred that we're now having to deal with on a daily basis. Hatred based on religion needs to be acknowledged on a global platform for all faiths and how it's a fundamental human right. The psychological impacts of hate, not only by those executing this, but also by those at the receiving end, it needs to be talked about more widely and should dominate the media instead of what we all consume. We are fed this diet, as TC rightly says, we are fed this diet that instills anger, hatred. It's all deliberate or not. Maybe it's just about simple engagement. It's clickbait. But whatever it is, the results are the same, James, are they? We are all driven to anger when we see these things in the media.
Absolutely, Angus. And let's not forget too, even just what we're seeing here with the gun violence in Surrey and across Canada. It is really, like, as we spoke about when we broke down media and cycles, we talked about the echo chamber of the same message over and over. and whether it's subliminal or direct, this is having a huge impact on the others who don't understand the Sikh community or the Hindu community, and they're just seeing this extortion violence, and they are painting everybody with the same brush when they're not really focused on the fact that they are, the majority of people that they're seeing in the news are the victims. They're victimized by the select few that are involved in the Bushnoi gang or others. So again, it creates that echo chamber, creates an anger and a frustration by the mainstream public that really is misguided. And it is the planned attack by whether it's the Hindutva media, the RSS, RAW, and others to try and perpetuate a division and anger and hatred and, at the end of the day, violence, unfortunately. So we need to really focus on a lot of the positive stories as well to show the mainstream communities what amazing people are being targeted by all of this small group of assholes, excuse the language, but that's what they are. And that is really important, Angus.
Yeah, and the irony here, and there is a level of hypocrisy. We just talked about how the Govt media manipulates its audience. Well, here we go. I mean, actually, here in the West, we have exactly the same issue: is that our media is manipulating us. So it's clear as day. The difference, of course, between here and India is that we can appear in public and call it out and account for it without, hopefully, touch wood, without going to prison. Although I have to say, here in the UK, as we've often reported, people are now being sent to prison for Facebook and tweets and things that don't necessarily go along with the narrative. So again, this is why we all combined, united, need to call this out whenever we see it. Next comment. Again, this is an interesting comment. This is from Stay Safe. I don't fear nationalists here. What I noticed in those who were in the Stand Up to Racism march, they all looked much more sensible and healthier, these so-called liberals. And then compared to those at the English march, the Unite the Nation, or what it was called, march, they all looked in bad shape. Now, this is a really interesting comment, and I'll tell you why. You need to be very careful. Talking about media manipulation, and again, this is a classic example of how we in the West are deliberately manipulated by our media. Stay safe. You've picked up something that is actually quite well known about. The media in the West, and has happened in the past, they've been called out for an agenda that's been highlighted by people from the inside. Whistleblowers have actually released information, intelligence, to the truth about an agenda. When the government, or when let's say that whoever wants to control the narrative very deliberately covers opposing marches in very different ways. On one side, that they want people to hate, they will only interview people with tattoos, with piercings, who look a bit old, a bit unintelligent, who are not very articulate, and come across very badly. And then the side that they want to portray as being the goodies, the good side, they will interview very civilized, very well dressed, very well spoken, very articulate people. It's simple manipulation. And this is what you've just seen here. What you've just, unfortunately, Stay Safe, you've fallen victim to this. This is what the media do. Is that they've gone, it's very clear that the agenda here in the West, and certainly here in the UK, is to really paint anybody who went to that huge march in London the other weekend, that the government hate them. The government are trying to paint them as far-right extremists. They weren't. I'll tell you now, they were not. They were ordinary, decent people from all backgrounds, all religions, as it turned out. Many Sikhs actually attended that same march. They were not racist. They were not extremists. They were just people angry, firstly, about our restricted freedom of speech, about our government, secondly, about uncontrolled immigration, etc., etc. But they, as you rightly say, as you rightly sort of point out, were portrayed as extremists, as unintelligent, as a bit dirty, as a bit unhealthy. You look at all the interviews on television, the people they interviewed couldn't speak very well. They couldn't really phrase their argument. And they did actually find a few extremists, because yes, there were some extremists there, and they're the only ones they showed. But then they go to the counter marches, the ones that the government want to highlight as being, they're the good guys. And of course, likewise, as you say, they were all the healthy ones, the ones that came across much more sensibly. It's simple media manipulation, James.
Absolutely. And a very clear example of this is if you want to end tornadoes, ban trailer parks. Because it always seems that in the States, when there's a tornado, they always flock to the trailer parks because the big mansions are stable. They're not being blown away. The trailer parks are. But they always find the same type of people to interview. And it gives that perception of the trailer park. And it's always, some guy stand there going, well, I didn't think my hubcap collection would go again this year because it happens every year. And, I thought the neighbor's cow was flying through the air, but that was just grandma in her pajamas. It's always the same type of people that they're interviewing. And it's to try and put that idea in your mind, but also to sell the news. And whether it's online or traditional, it's all about making money for these corporations. And the individuals or the groups such as the RSS and RAW know how to use that by paying the media or buying the media. For a lot of the individuals, they own a lot of media. And that's how they deliver their message in the guise of traditional media and just really driving home that echo chamber, as we say, Angus.
Indeed. And apologies to anybody in a trailer park who might be watching. But yeah, this
or with the grandma's cow pajamas flying in through the air. I don't know.
Apologies to all grandmothers wearing pajamas who might be watching us. And but yes, it is. It's an absolute prime example. This is an old trick. It's an old trick of the news here in the West. It's pure and simple manipulation. It's like the Govt media. So again, it's utter hypocrisy on behalf of the Western media. Mohand Anoa, Lawrence Bishnoi. Yeah, we talked a lot about him, how he's sitting in prison as a VIP. Amit Shah, the Deputy Prime Minister of India, he's also from Gujarat. Yes, it's part of this Gujarati mafia. That's why he's treated as a VIP. Shah uses his gang of criminals to achieve his thuggishness around the world. As we talk about the proxy killers, he got away with murder in Canada. Found out in the US, it's not quite the same. He came up again when he tried to assassinate Gurpatant Singh Panin. I would say that's probably maybe a little bit of luck on behalf of Gurpatant Singh Panin's capture, or his potential killers being captured. But yeah, ultimately, it's the Gujarati mafia, James. Again, they look after their own. There's two-tier justice.
Absolutely. And let's face it, I mean, it was because the attempted assassins, or those that were trying to set that in motion, were dumb enough to try to hire FBI or undercover law enforcement to do it. So again, that thankfully was a big part of preventing Mr. Panin's demise. So again, credit to those who prevented it, because yeah, he is a force. We like to laugh and really, watch what he's doing, because he's full of energy and he's a firecracker when it comes to, mixing the pot. But again, it was, I think a part of it too was just the arrogance that they thought they wouldn't get caught, and they did.
Indeed. And Amakara, we talked about the other day about somebody suggested, one of our viewers suggested, why don't we hold a referendum in Malaysia? Well, Amakara's come up, so why not also do it in Singapore, just down the road? And as you rightly say, Singapore is an island. It's an island, so the likelihood of a huge turnout is very good, because of course Singapore, I've spent a lot of time there myself. It's not a very big island. In other words, it's very likely that every Sikh in Singapore is going to turn out for a referendum there, James.
Absolutely. And if you are one of our viewers in Singapore, by all means, reach out to us. Let us know what your thoughts are.
Indeed. I don't know how many Sikhs there are in Singapore. That's something we'll have to have a look at. Sat Namajuli. Apologies for my pronunciation. Anyway, thank you for your comment. Good to see you, both of you, Angus and Jess. It was very good to see you. And in fact, it's always very good to see, not that we can see our audience, but we do know you there because of your comments. So thank you. And I say, we can't do the show without you. So thank you for all your lovely comments. We do. I like to pick a few random nice comments out, just as a blanket thank you to all of you who do send in these lovely comments. Satbachan Singh says, yeah, we're straight and truthful news. That's what we try and do. Remind the human society a message of goodwill. Many thanks to both of you, most respected believers in humanity. The key words here, I'll put this comment up because the key words here are humanity. It comes back to this 80% of us, or whatever it is. We are really humanity. We are not the extremes. We are just the normal people. As I always say, the people always win in the end, but we have to mobilize ourselves. We have to unite for humanity to save humanity from itself, James.
Absolutely. And, we're doing our part to bring the truth. And, we just really are inspired by the fact that our viewers want the truth. And that's why we have the privilege of being here on the air.
Indeed. And how do you build a diamond? Well, a diamond is made through extreme heat and extreme pressure. Well, Stay Safe is using the same principle about Khalistan. The Indian regime deliberately flooded us. They didn't finish us off. It made us stronger to learn survivalism. Strength is conditioned in pressure. We can use their hatred as motivation. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And what I would say, James, it's very clear that it's not as if the Sikh population globally needs any more pressure or any more motivation to push for Khalistan. I think it is inherent in there ever since 1849 when they lost the Sikh Empire. I think that motivation has never gone away, and if anything, it's getting stronger and stronger.
Absolutely. And don't forget the other way to make diamonds. You know, Keir Starmer is so tight when it comes to actually doing anything good. You couldn't stick a piece of coal up his ass, he'll shit you out a diamond. But
I knew where you were going with that one, yes.
I just had to throw that in there for you, Angus.
Absolutely.
Talk about your buddy Keir Starmer.
My mate Keir Starmer. I wonder if he ever watches the show. I wish he would. But anyway, we'll finish the show with something in Punjabi. You know who you are. Thank you, Mr. Punjabi, for your comment. Khalistan Zindabad. A lovely comment that we always like to finish on. Khalistan Zindabad. That's what we're here for, and that is what we look forward to. It's coming. So keep the faith, as we say. It's born out of pressure and all sorts of extreme heat from the Indian state. It is going to come. That diamond of the future, that diamond nation, is foreseeable. It's on its way. But unfortunately, we must bring perspectives to a close for another day. But thanks so much for all of you, for all your comments. Do keep them coming in. Do let us know anything you'd like us to talk about. Don't forget, you can, of course, message us directly. There you go, the press of a magic button. Send us an email, message@satellitetv.com if there's anything you'd like us to talk about, or you just want to send us a comment directly with it. You don't want to put it in the public domain. But that's it for another day. Thanks so much for watching. It's a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.